Back with Wilkins. Absolutely magnificent from Ray Wilkins. Well with the header, but it's Durant again. The last chance perhaps for Rangers. A chance is on for goal. Durant makes it 2-apiece. Johnston, and he scored.
Against Cantona, nicely left there by Haitley, and here's the break on. It's Ian Durant through to Haitley. McCoist on the far side. Gary Speed is racing back to provide the cover. Here's Ali McCoist. Oh, he's done it! Ali McCoist from Rangers.
Here's Gascoigne now. Can he produce some magic? Still it's Gascoigne. Oh yes! A tremendous goal by Gascoigne. It's been very evenly balanced. Here's Gascoigne now, pushing forward, showing great determination. Oh, he's done it again!
There's a slip by O'Neill. And Laudrup to win. Rangers look for a goal and get one! In the 8th minute from Brian Laudrup. Celtic's wall is 5 strong. But Alberts gets it through! The hammer has torn Celtic apart.
It's Barry Ferguson! Oh yes! The captain shows the way! Here now is Neil McCann. Is there going to be a twist in the tail? Lovenkrands! Yes, there is! Peter Lovenkrands! It had to be him! He has surely won the Scottish Cup!
Like this, here's Davis, put in by Darshville. Davis! Darshville! They've nicked it! Away from home! Manchester, brace yourself. Rangers are coming!
Bit of stoppage time. Kevin Thompson's corner. It's Bagheera! Borat stops it. Boyd! Edu has put it in! Boris Edu! Right at the end!
There's no doubt Vice has made an impact since he has come onto the park. Jelavic is in behind. It's Jelavic for Rangers! It's scored!
Jelavic on to Davis, and Lafferty's in already! He scored! Inside the first minute! Luco, definitely a threat! Still going! That is just brilliant! A goal for Luco! A goal for the fans! A goal for the cause! Here's Mackay. Barry Mackay! Looking to make it happen here. He might just do that. Right check! Deflected off Brown and in!
And Gulaci was missing, and there's Lundstram! John Lundstram with the goal! But here's Joe Aribo, a slip from Tutan. Aribo! A bolt from the blue! Joe Aribo!
Hello everyone and welcome along to our latest live Monday edition of the TII podcast. Some of the more creative people in the background have gone about renaming some of the podcasts, and going forward the Monday night podcast will be called The Breakdown, as we look back over some of the events of the weekend and also look ahead to the week that's upcoming. There isn't really a bigger week to start, I guess, looking ahead than this one, as we've got an Old Firm game taking place this Saturday lunchtime. And to start looking ahead to it, I'm joined by two of our experienced podcasters. Kyran, how you doing?
I'm great, thanks. Looking forward to the weekend ahead and coming off the back of another good win and what was a monumental weekend for This Is Ibrox. So, yeah, it's a good time to be on.
Absolutely, we'll touch on that in a second. Patrick, you're joining us for sadly what is your final podcast with TII for a while, but at least welcome along.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I sadly saw some images of what transpired 365 days ago when we played Celtic at home, which started so well and then fell apart. So hopefully we can do what they did to us in their back garden. And I'm looking forward to it.
Always good to start the podcast off on a positive note, Patrick. And thanks very much for that one. As Kyran alluded to, it was a monumental weekend for the TII team. It was our first weekend on the gantry for the Rangers first team as well as the Rangers B team, and it was a very good job indeed by Kyle and Ross for the game against Dundee United, and then Kyle got his fill of Ibrox at the weekend. He was back again on Sunday for the B team Old Firm game alongside Scott Patterson. So some really good coverage from the guys, and it's great to be able to have that access now going forward, at least until the end of the season, and we're very hopeful that will continue beyond. And fingers crossed. I'm looking forward to it at some point getting along. Unfortunately, was heading down to London at the weekend and didn't manage it. But yes, absolutely I don't think I've ever looked forward to a St Mirren game at Ibrox so much in my life. Kyran, before we move on to the week ahead, just a word on the weekend's game. It was quite I described it as a meh game. It was just a straightforward win. There wasn't really anything overly exciting about it. Is that how you saw it?
I think we could label it as deja vu. It just seems to be the same movie over and over again every time we go to Ibrox. We get ahead, the game's more or less done, and we're not going and scoring the 4 or 5 goals in which we should. 2-0 and cruising. Good enough performance. No real standouts aside from Malik Tillman, who no doubt we'll speak about soon enough. But again, I just really want to see a ruthless streak from this team. Just that way of saying, right, okay, we've got 2 goals, the game's done. You still don't look like you're going to come out your half. We're going to come and put 5 or 6 past you. That's what I want to see from Michael Beale's Rangers. And once again, I think we're looking ahead to next season is what we will look to see, that sort of thing, if you get what I mean. That I'm getting my words mixed up. But yeah, we bit disappointed we didn't see a ruthless streak to go and hammer a team that we're not exactly best friends with. But yeah, happy with 2-0 too.
Yeah, and we'll definitely come on to speak about how important that goal difference is and continuing to push, even when we know the game is won, continuing to push for more and more goals. Patrick, I think the weekend was the first time that we've really seen Todd Cantwell and Malik Tillman really click into gear together, and we're seeing that relationship develop. That was a real positive from Saturday.
Yeah, it was nice. It was capped off. Obviously, they collaborated for the first goal and celebrated as a duo as well, with some sort of American football kind of thing. But I think Michael Beale had mentioned in the press conference prior that was a partnership we were going to see a bit more of. It was something that there were certainly questions over in January when we signed him, whether Cantwell would be physically able to sort of play alongside Tillman as 2 sort of 8s, and what that would look like and who would be behind them. And it worked well here, obviously. The vast majority of games we can set up and really have any sort of midfield configuration that we want. For whatever reason, that has looked like Jack and Lundstram together for some times, which boggles the mind. But luckily, that wasn't what we had on Sunday. We saw something slightly more attacking for the most part. And I think it's working well. Both players are doing well, and more importantly, they're sort of standing out. It's not like everyone's playing well, and Cantwell's just joined this sort of functioning machine in which you just spit in players and they'll play well. He's playing well amongst players who are putting in average to below average performances. So long may that continue, and hopefully everyone takes those 2 players as example and sort of rises up to them as opposed to Cantwell and Tillman dropping down.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd have to agree with that. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how Rangers line up on Saturday lunchtime, because I've seen about 5 lineups or 5 predicted lineups so far, and every one has been different. So it's definitely going to be a big talking point as we move through the week. I've even seen Malik Tillman as a number 9 quite a few times, which I know a few people have been calling out for over the past couple of months or so. Kyran, looking ahead to a big week for the club. We're away to Celtic. No Rangers fans are going to be in the stadium on Saturday lunchtime. At this stage of the week, we're on Monday, 5-6 days to go. How are you feeling about it?
It's one of the ones. I believe at the moment we're out of the running. I don't think that's too controversial to say for the league. But we don't go there. We don't go there not to win. It's in their backyard. It's Bill's first time there as manager. He got it badly wrong in the semi-final, and I really hope that he's learned from his mistakes there and we go there and put on a performance. We'll speak about the team later on, but I don't think it's going to be the usual shape that we see. Going by all the hints and stuff that we've seen with formations and talk in the press conferences, but I'm quietly confident we need to play better than we did in the semi-final. And when we took the game to them and played with tempo, after going 2 goals down in the semi-final, we showed that we could go at them. The biggest mistake of that game was not playing Cantwell, also subbing off Morelos. But if Cantwell is firing, which he has been, then he's got to be a big figure in this game. And I really hope that's the case.
Yeah, I think so, and I think to be fair, it was not playing Cantwell and Raskin. I think was the big decision in the last one that I think everyone felt Michael Beale got wrong, and going by his post-match comments after that one, I think he thinks he got it wrong as well. Patrick, I read earlier on today that we have a 15% win rate at Celtic Park since the 2000-2001 season. It's not really a stat that fills with confidence as we head into this type of game.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the vast majority of those wins will have come in the early 2000s and noughties, and then there would have been a sort of comeback under Gerrard and that sort of when we won on New Year's, and then in the 55 season where we won in draw, I think it was 2-0 and 1-1 or something like that. So it's not great. Obviously recently it's been really poor. Been on the end of a few, for lack of a better word, drubbings, 4 and 3-0. I think that obviously we want to go and win, but the first thing we need to do is make sure we don't get embarrassed, because it's been becoming a trend when 2 or 3 times where we've gone there and it's been played off the park. On sort of every facet, technically, physically, even the sort of input, it seemed that we were second to everything, whereas the sort of the blueprint to winning any game, and especially a derby away, is to be the team that works harder. I know that's something that sort of is on the basis of Rangers and the club itself and the fans, but I do think, obviously, at this point, we have the technical ability to go toe-to-toe. I'd still say I don't think it's sort of unpopular at all to say Celtic's team is better at the moment. I think it'd be very difficult to argue against that. But I do think we can put an 11 up that sort of matches them fairly well, and especially relative to where their weaknesses are. We have a few players who can exploit that. But we haven't done so, and that's for a number of reasons. Individual player sort of poor performances, them playing really well. Obviously, that's really been the story of the last few games. It's been us playing poorly, and not to take away from them, they've been really good. So hopefully we can flip that and put in a sort of working performance, but one that also shows off some technique.
Yeah, Kyran, Patrick mentioned some of the sort of up and down performances we've had against Celtic in recent years. I think under Steven Gerrard, we all felt that we were almost the favourites going into every game against Celtic when Steven Gerrard was at the helm, particularly after that victory where Ryan Jack scored the winner. At Ibrox, I think that almost flipped 180 when Giovanni Van Bronckhorst came in, and you almost feared that every game was going to be a 3-0, 4-0, 5-0 defeat. The team looked almost devoid of confidence as soon as they went into these types of games. I think what Michael Beale has shown just in the 2 games that we've had so far this year, obviously the one at New Year where I felt we should have won, and then the cup final where we didn't play well, but at no point were we out of it. I think that confidence is starting to come back, especially amongst the fans. How do you feel about that, and do you feel our approach is becoming more positive and we have more reason for optimism going into these games?
Yeah, you've just reminded me. I actually said semi-final earlier in the show, but it was a cup final. I got it wrong. I think you touched on the Ryan Jack game there, and I think with that it was very pivotal in Gerrard's role to go on and win 55, that we needed that win. We hadn't beat them in the league for a long, long time, and I think we're kind of at that stage with Beale at the moment. We shot ourselves in the foot in the game at New Year. The final was just one to forget. I think we need that win. If he goes and gets the win here, then I'm pretty confident that we kick on from there. the pendulum does seem to swing between the Old Firm depending on when managers leave and new managers come in. So that's another thing we need to look towards, that if they were ever to change manager, then it would fully swing in our favour, because if you remember rightly, it fully swung in our favour when Rodgers left them. But no, I think Beale needs that pivotal win for it to shift back in our favour, for the players to get that taste of this is what it feels like to win an Old Firm game. Because if you remember rightly, everything went against us in that New Year game where Celtic scored, but we still went on to get the win. The players had a plan, set pieces, we were outstanding. I think we'll see a wee bit more from that with Beale's team. I think we've got a plan, going by Goldson's press conference last week, saying that we've been working on a few things in training. If one thing's not working, we'll try the other, and so on, so on. So for me, I'm quite confident that we can go and do it. But again, it comes down to team selection for me. There's a few players that shouldn't be playing because they've failed time and time again against them.
Yeah, I think the team selection will be really interesting. I think we'll all be going to Twitter for about an hour before kickoff on Saturday morning. Patrick, Kyran mentions that we need that pivotal win, as he puts it, or Michael Beale needs that pivotal win to start to shift that pendulum a bit. Tommy, our esteemed editor, says away fans issue needs sorted longer term. We're also going into the game on Saturday with no away fans there. How much harder do you think that makes it for the team? Does it have that much of an impact? We're looking at the maximum, we're 800 fans being there if fans were allowed. How much of an impact do you think having none there will have?
I mean, I think it would be, obviously, need to phrase it as I've not played football at any level that would merit many fans wanting to come watch it. So there's no personal experience. But I guess in my experience playing basketball, when we had a large crowd, that would always help. But I think it would be disingenuous to sort of pretend that it would make a massive difference, but also disingenuous to pretend it would make no difference. I think it's sort of the classic quote is that players don't really differentiate between the noise. They just hear noise, and especially in games which are so loud, like the Old Firm, for example. But I do think it would add some sort of kick or a mini boost, whereas if we were to go down and then the Rangers fans sort of hype the team up, or if we're winning and it's sort of a siege, a la the 2-1 last year at home when Celtic were we were sieging Celtic and they were able to keep sort of the goal, or keep their, not clean sheet, but keep the win. And I'm sure their fans played a part in it. But I think obviously long term it's an important issue. I'm not a season ticket holder, so I don't think I have the right to speak that much on it. Obviously everyone is a stakeholder in some aspect, and that's something that will be debated for a long time. And I don't think we'll probably ever see an outcome that everyone wants, just on the basis of the argument itself. But I do think it would be better, obviously, to have away fans than not. There's obviously some concerns about what we offer Celtic and the reciprocity of what we get given, and how they're probably not equitable, despite the fact that they're the same numbers, just on the basis that Celtic Park has iron girders everywhere, especially where we're put. But it would be interesting to see how it goes if we were to win and no fans to be there. It would be quite fun to hear an empty Celtic Park and the fans sort of get going out of it while the Rangers players are making noise on the pitch. But equally, you would want fans to be there to hype them up should we go down. But I don't know. You saw Rangers play so well in front of no fans. So if we do well and quiet the Celtic fans, will be reminiscent of the 55 season, which saw us sort of beat everyone in front of no one, which was sad, but I would take that.
Yeah, Kyran, I think we would take a Rangers win no matter how many fans were in the stadium, to be honest. Where do you stand on the whole away fans thing? I think ever since it started being discussed, I've always felt that the European allocation that we've seen with the likes of Dortmund, we even saw the likes of Partick Thistle and Raith Rovers get it in the Cup earlier this season. I think that seems to be where I would probably land on the whole situation, but it does feel like something that needs sorted, as Tommy says, doesn't it?
Yeah, it has become very tit for tat. We were the ones that did stop the larger away allocation, but it came to them getting the full Broomland stand, and now it's kind of came round to them pulling the plug on these tickets. So Rangers have done the same back for the following game post split. I'd have fans there, right? To be fair, right, okay, they've had the better of us in the Old Firm games. It doesn't feel great when you're in the stadium and it's getting rubbed in your face and they're there, but it's a rivalry. It's one of the biggest in the whole world. Why shouldn't away fans be there? It's a real frustration of mine. I know it splits the fan base right down the middle, but for me, you should have away fans there. And let's be honest, they want to come to our ground, but there's nothing better than going to their ground, feeling like you're in the minority and trying to make as much sound as you can and really get behind the team. But like Patrick said with the steel girders, that's the other thing. You're sitting behind scaffold poles there, and most of the seats are restricted view if you're far enough into that corner. So is it worth the money going there and missing half the game? I'm not so sure. We're a bit kinder to them when you talk about the European allocation, where you've got a pretty decent view anywhere you sit at that part of the stadium.
Yeah, actually, just as to point in, it is an alarming trend, and that derby matches are being played only with home fans. And I think we're one of the only ones in which it's not put on by security legislation. So you get the derbies in Athens and Thessaloniki, which no away fans are allowed at. You get the derby in Istanbul, all three of them. And then you get their Classico, which was played last week. And all of them, it goes without the club's ambition to offer away tickets. They're just not allowed to for security reasons. So it's a bit of a shame that we're purposely choosing not to do so, and we're not getting our hand pushed. But I guess it's much like a lot of the discussion surrounding everything with the club. There's a million positions, and the minority are probably the loudest.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're all in agreement that it definitely needs to be sorted and sooner rather than later. David Hutchinson in the comments saying we must beat that mob, no excuses. Caroline saying we have to win on Saturday. I do feel it's as a sense of a stake in the ground that we have to win on Saturday. I don't, as Kyran said earlier, I'm in a similar boat in terms of I don't think whether we win, draw or lose on Saturday will have any impact on where the league title ends up this season. But I think in terms of making a mark and setting out a line in the sand, if I can find any more of those kind of phrases, we just need to push forward and almost use it as a springboard for next season, because that's ultimately where we're looking now. Kyran, I can see you want to come in.
Yeah. See, if we're being really honest, right, the past month they've not exactly been in clearing form either. I know there's been a lot of talk about us not going and burying teams when we're ahead, but they've not been in the greatest of form either. So if we can get going and have a real go at them, get the team selection right, then we can go and get the win. There's no reason to say that we can't, but you're bang on there, Craig. Looking forward to next season, giving the players a taste of, right, you can go and beat them. This is how you do it, and you stick to that plan. It's an intimidating place, Parkhead, I imagine, if you go and play there. We know what they're like, how quickly they get the ball back into play with the ball boys. We've got to be switched on to that. Time and time again, we've seen the same mistakes under Gio, where we were getting caught with cross balls. Happened again in the final. We need to be prepared. If we're prepared, we'll be fine.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. But that brings us nicely on to what is the main title of tonight's podcast. Can Rangers compete with Celtic? And I think that's a question that can be broken down into many layers, and we'll try and do that just now. As an overarching statement, Patrick, can Rangers compete with Celtic?
Yeah, in a one-off 90 minutes is both currently constructed. Yeah, we can compete. I think it's always relative to what you say is to competing, but I see us being able to win if we put in a good game. I still think as currently constructed, we can compete in a 38-game season. At least this 38-game season we've had, because we were sort of handicapped by our early season struggles with when Van Bronckhorst was in charge. But I think obviously there's a few key things that need to go right. But I think it'd be disingenuous or for that wrong to say we can't compete. Does that mean we'll win the league this season? No, I think most prediction models have us currently at between 2% and 5%. And let's say hypothetically, if we were to win on the weekend, it would probably bump up to 10 to 15, but then we're still 4 points behind, which is really 5 considering the goal difference, which means we have to win, and then they need to drop points, ideally lose to someone else. And given the current sort of state of the rest of the crop with Aberdeen, Hibs and Hearts all trying to lose third place, it doesn't seem like that will come from anywhere. But I think obviously we can compete. They're in the better form, albeit as Kyran said, neither team are in great form, which is true. Our 10-game rolling expected goal difference average is pretty much on point for the last 15 games since Beale's come. It's normalized to levels where it's pretty much parity. And before that, they were almost a full expected goal above us under GVB. So we've certainly improved and they've regressed a bit, but that's not to say that they're getting worse. It's more so that they were so unsustainably good at the beginning of the season that it's effectively impossible to maintain like a 4 expected goal difference. It's just unheard of anywhere outside of like under 11s boys football sort of stuff. But they're good. I think anyone who wants to downplay how good they are is probably wrong. Statistically, they're the most dominant side in Europe right now. Obviously, that has to do with the fact that they don't play against good competition 9 out of 10 weeks. So they're dominating, but the sort of standard of competition is quite easy to dominate. We can see for Rangers the same. We've been playing what is quote unquote poorly this season, but if you were to sort of extrapolate our data and put it to anywhere else, we'd be seen as sort of above and beyond title-winning quality. But again, probably says more about the league quality than the team quality specifically. I think importantly, what we need to do is neither team have good goalkeepers. So I think, hopefully, we can see Al McGregor in what will likely be his penultimate Old Firm game, because I don't think, obviously, John McLaughlin, given what he did last time in September, is not going to get another go in the Old Firm, and obviously Robbie McCrory is injured. So that'll be important because Celtic, albeit fantastic this season, have had the luck of opposition goalkeepers basically losing their hands when they play against them. There's a thing called prevented goals per 90, which is basically the shot and the value of it. So if you put it in the top corner, it's a 0.99 out of 1. So 99% of times you're scoring that. And this season so far, pretty much Celtic have started with 0.6 goals on the basis that the poor performance in other teams' goalkeepers are gifting them 0.6 goals, which is massive, especially when you're playing against someone like Celtic, whereas we've only got 0.05. So they're starting with a considerable advantage. And obviously, like the goal of any social scientist, deducting causation and correlation is important. So obviously, they will have sort of reaped their luck by shooting more than us, shooting from better positions, scoring more and all that. But ideally, what hopefully we'll see is a good goalkeeper come up against Celtic, albeit Al McGregor hasn't been great this season, but it would be very nice for him to cap off what looks like his last season with some sort of legacy in it, and hopefully that sees him making some great saves and perhaps repeating his heroics of, I think it was January 2021 when he's made umpteen amazing saves, specifically the Lee Griffiths one, and then again hopefully helping us win the semi-final to then go pick up that Scottish Cup.
Yeah, Kyran, Patrick made a lot of good points there. One of the main reasons I asked the question around can Rangers compete with Celtic, the build-up in the media has started as you would expect on the Monday of Old Firm week. Chris Commons has said in the Daily Record today that Michael Beale has had a great start to life at Rangers, but Rangers can't live with Celtic. Paul Lambert has told Sky Sports News Rangers are not strong enough to push Celtic. What's your reaction to those types of comments? Because it's not often you hear opposition ex-players complimenting how Rangers are playing, but at the same time it's a very much a backhanded compliment in that sense.
Yeah, it kind of links in with the last question as well, that the competition, we're at a stage where we're coming into a rebuild where the guys competing haven't done it to the level we've expected. They've now got a settled squad that seem to be able to pick up the wins as well as we can in the league. We're certainly since under Beale came in, but they seem to have the more settled squad, in my opinion. For us, we are still sort of 4 or 5 players away from that. In terms of Commons and Lambert, I don't know on these ones. I think it's just something we're beginning to get used to, that the Celtic send a placeman out before Old Firm games that tend to make sound bites. I'm surprised we've not seen anything on penalties and handballs and VAR yet, but I'm sure we will come towards the game. But in terms of what they're saying there, I don't fully agree. I don't fully agree that we can't compete. They have got weaknesses in their team, as do we. I think we're getting a lot closer to them than they think we are. So if they want to stay as confident as they are, that's absolutely fine. But under Beale, I think we've now won something like 45 from a possible 47 points. And as crazy as it sounds, I think we can finish the season on 100 points. So when you look at it like that, has it been that bad a season? No, they've just been really, really strong. That few weeks under Van Bronckhorst, where he was coming to the end of his tenure, has cost us big time. But the signs are positive under Beale. We can compete with them, maybe just not at the moment. And like Patrick said as well, we need to be consistent of 38 games and not just Old Firm games in the season, then yeah, we can compete with them, but we need to go and sign that Cantwell and Raskin quality of player when we go for this rebuild come the summer, to really solidify that competition against them. But no, we're not as far away as them as some may suggest.
Yeah, Patrick, Kyran mentioned there that he felt that we are sort of 4 or 5 players away from being able to compete on that sort of consistent basis with Celtic across the sort of 38 game period. Where do you feel our strengths are, and where do you feel the weaknesses are?
Well, I mean, if we're talking in sort of on the context of strengths relative to when we're playing a team like Celtic, I think obviously there's some physical strength. I don't think Greg Taylor's fit on the weekend, so he was usually the physical sort of misnomer on their side. Technically good, works really well in Ange's system, but physically is there to be get at. You can see that whenever Celtic play any team, they'll always target the sort of long ball over the left to Greg Taylor. And you'd expect Sakala would be the physical matchup that would be perfect for that. It didn't really work out in the cup because he would beat Taylor and then he would sort of make a poor decision with his final ball or take a step too many. But I think in terms of this game, our strength might come from the fact that we are being played down on the bay, that we can't compete with Celtic in those sort of sound bites. In that, I don't think there's evidence going off the last few Celtic games that you can say that we have an overriding strength that we can look to. I think the strength might be born out of sort of not knowing what it would look like when Cantwell, Raskin and Tillman play against Celtic. There's a lot of unknowns that we look to be trending towards being a positive. All the evidence looks like Cantwell's great and he should work well against Celtic. All the evidence looks like him and Tillman can play together against teams and that we've been putting together good results. And we just have yet to show that against Celtic, which is a bit annoying when the team selection came out in the semi-finals, because there was almost a pre-produced excuse, which you never want, which was we didn't play our best team. Obviously, the sort of objective of setting a starting lineup is to put your best 11 players. And the manager knows that best, but in hindsight, and even in foresight, a lot of people were saying that it was the wrong selection. So on that basis, it's what we don't know. So it might be to our strengths. I would hope that whatever performance Campbell put in will be better than what we saw from Kamara and Lundstram in the semi-final. I don't think it can be worse unless we're just we absolutely gubbed and it's the most embarrassing game ever, because those were some of the poorest performance I've seen in a Rangers shirt, both in terms of technical ability and just general application. So yeah, I would say we have a strength on the basis of what we can see. And obviously there is good confidence in the team right now. The performances might not be fantastic, but winning breeds confidence. There's been some good performances amongst some sort of mediocre performances, but we're yet to hit a big roadblock in the last month or two. So it's been growing steadily. And as Kyran said, Celtic haven't been on fire, albeit they're doing the exact same as we are. They're just turning over the points, but we're the ones chasing. So they're sitting in an incredibly comfortable position right now. And maybe that comfort will sort of engender overconfidence, hopefully. That would be the hope, is that it's a game in which we come sort of undervalued and they're overvalued and we take them by surprise.
Yeah, I'm just going to bring a couple of comments there before I get your thoughts, Kyran. Ross has come in and says, I think the run of form lately clearly shows we can compete with Celtic in this league. There hasn't been a lot between the two teams in the last two games. Don't let the negative press get to you. I'm going to divert from usual protocol, and I'm going to bring up this comment, Kyran, because it leads into the question I'm going to ask you. And it says, as a Celtic fan who's watching a Rangers podcast, I agree that Gers are not too far behind. Your problem is not how do you get close or compete, but how do you have a summer window to accelerate past Celtic by a decent margin. I think that's an interesting point, because it's not about catching up with them. It's what do we need to do going forward to correct the weaknesses that we are seeing and to, as the comment says, accelerate past Celtic as we head into next season.
Yeah, I'm enlightened to start slagging here, but I'm not actually quite like the question. I think it's very constructive, and we're here to talk football. So, in terms of the squad, there's a great core there. I'm not going to say the spine, because I think what's glaring in that Rangers team is there's an issue in goals. McGregor, his best days are past him. it's fair to say, still a top quality goalkeeper. We've been very fortunate in the sense that he was a predecessor to, when you look back, Gorham, Kloss, some of the goalkeepers we've had over the years. We've been very, very fortunate that McGregor was custom-made sitting there, and he's broke through in his 500 appearances later. But we need a new number one, so that is glaring there. The back line, I would say, is okay. I think it's fine. Barisic, I think we'll wait and see what happens at the end of the season with him, but Yilmaz looks to be the predecessor to him. The middle of the park is where we have to get it right. There is a few names floating about. Raskin's come in, Cantwell's held down that position there, and ultimately it looks like we're going to sign Tillman. I think Jack will get a new contract, but we still need that number 6 sitting midfielder that's going to be dominant. Now, that's not Lundstram's position for me. I've said it time and time again on this podcast that as a sitting midfielder, he's very passive. He's far too safe for me. When you watch a guy like Raskin, when he comes deep, he's almost like a deep line playmaker where his first thought is to go forward. So for me, in there, a number 6. And I think the big one is we need a striker. We need a 25 goal a season striker that's going to put the ball in the net. Every successful season we have had, at least one of our strikers has been on form. You look back to the 55 season when even Defoe, Morelos, and Roof all took their turn of putting the ball in the net. So we're certainly a far way off that. We can't rely on Roof anymore. We don't know what's happening with Morelos. And I certainly wouldn't fancy it. As much as I do like him, I wouldn't fancy Cholak playing up front himself at Parkhead. That's the barometer for a Rangers striker for me. So striker and a goalkeeper are the big ones, but we're in desperate need of a real sitting centre midfielder, like a deep line playmaker, because you look at the pattern every game. Connor Goldson seems to be the guy that's a deep line playmaker, and you really want your defenders to defend and your deep line playmakers to move forward with the ball and progress the game for the team. So that's where I think we could strengthen and look to overtake them.
Yeah, Curry Muncher says we are already good enough. It is a belief we are lacking, and that seed was sown by Giovanni van Bronckhorst. Once that monkey is off their back, we are the better team. Patrick, Kyran highlighted the fact that a striker is much needed in the summer. I think it's been needed for a few summers, if we're being brutally honest with ourselves. One of the major talking points has been the goal difference and the gap in goal difference between ourselves and Celtic. We're 30 plus goals behind this season already, and we've still got 10 games left. Is that down to style of play, or is it down to attitude, or is it down to sort of a combination of the two?
Yeah, those two plus a bit of luck. As I said earlier, Celtic enjoys some subpar goalkeeping when they play against their teams. I think that they're overperforming their expected goal difference by 20, and we're overperforming it by 0.01. So we're right at where we should be, albeit we're conceding more than we should, and we're probably scoring a bit more than we should. But it's also relative to that they've caused it. There's causation there. They take better chances. They have more chances. They have better finishers. They dominate the ball more. They dominate the sort of final third territory more. And that's all on the basis less so, I think, of personal ability and more so of a sort of systemic outcome of that their system works really well. Especially it works specifically well, I think, against who they play against. The teams who are both tactically, physically, and technically subpar by a mile. And it's just more conducive to absolutely dominating teams. And we've seen that throughout the entire Celtic tenure. I think after they lost to Hearts, they then went beat St. Mirren 7-0. So I guess it's just a sort of output of their system specifically. We're not to that extent, not to say we can't be. I think any team, the sort of goal, especially when you look at the sort of disparity in funds that we enjoy relative to the chasing pack, that we really should be beating teams 5 or 6-0. And we do have what should be the technical quality to be beating teams 5 or 6-0, but there is some asymmetry between the application and the sort of hypothetical or potential ability there. Obviously, their goal difference is a lot better than ours. And I think a lot of people are going to look at goals scored because both of us have relatively good defenses. I think it's very similar, both expected, natural goals conceded. Obviously, if we had a slightly better goalkeeper, we'd probably save 1 or 2 goals. But I think you could look at the finishing, which has been slightly poor from really everyone but Cholak. Cholak's the one sort of outlier there who's been putting in clinical finishing to an extent. I think Sakala and Morelos less so. I think Sakala's probably the biggest culprit here. He's leaving about half his goals on the table. He's scoring a goal, 0.4 per game, but he should be scoring around 0.6 or 0.7. He should be up at that sort of Morelos and Lila Bada territory, but his poor finishing sort of deserts him there. Albeit you have to give him some credit because you don't just walk into good positions. He makes those opportunities himself, but he's one of the big problems there. Kent, similarly, he doesn't get as many chances, but his finishing has been a sort of problem for now 2 or 3 years. The single outlier season was the 55 season, and lots of people performed beyond their means there. So hopefully we can see him sort of retain some sort of value relative to the 55 season. Albeit we've seen it on Sunday especially, he does have some really good chances which are sort of saved by fantastic goalkeeping. I think Birighitti, who's not a good goalkeeper, did make a great save when Kent struck it from outside the box and managed to tip it on to the post. But I think games against Celtic is probably emblematic to our general ability or inability to catch them in goal difference. We've seen it as in the semi-final where Celtic were able to create clear-cut chances, almost happened twice, and we got one in the back post, but it was more so out of luck. So they seem to be just have a greater ability and consistency to create the chances. But that's not to say in a one-off game we're not able to score 6 or 7, because we've seen that. Hopefully it wasn't 6 or 7, 4 against Aberdeen, and that was a really good 4. And we've seen similar against Hearts twice. So it's more so a consistency of application, whereas Celtic kind of got it down to a T in sort of generating goal chances for 3 or 4 goals almost every game.
Yeah, Patrick, you mentioned Ryan Kent's shot that was saved at the weekend. It's a major frustration of mine, actually, how many shots we have and the percentage of them that are off target, but well off target at the same time. I'm always of the view that if you're a professional footballer, you should be able to hit the target with a shot, and the amount and the infrequency with which we're able to hit the target from pretty good goal scoring positions, even if that is from the edge of the 18-yard box, is quite something, and definitely something that I think needs corrected. Kyran, ahead of the last Old Firm game, Fashion Sakala got a lot of stick from both sides of the table for comments he made in the lead up to the game. Over the weekend, John Lundstram was quoted with another kind of similar quote, maybe not quite as out there as Fashion Sakala's, but John Lundstram said, "You'll see the gap probably isn't as big as what people make it out to be." What are your thoughts on players coming out with those kind of statements, and does it actually depend who the player is?
For me, this is just... I actually got a lot of stick the last time when I criticised Sakala for saying it was sheer stupidity. Let's not forget, we lost the last cup final. Lundstram on his own, and we spoke about it off air, he's played well once against Celtic in all the Old Firm games he's played. He's not the type of guy that should be coming out and talking. Do your talking on the pitch, because it's not been good enough so far. And for me, he doesn't start at the weekend. I'm a great admirer of Lundstram and he's on form, but he's not been on form. So he shouldn't be doing that talking in the press. We should have learned from this. And I think folk behind the scenes at Rangers really need to get a grip of these sound bites which we're putting out, because you make a rod for your own back with this stuff. I'm really not a fan of it at all.
Yeah, Patrick, are you in agreement with Kyran on that one? Do you feel that there is actually a place where these guys are asked a question, they just provide an answer, an honest answer at that one that's on the face of it not too controversial? Are you in agreement with Kyran, or do you actually think some of these comments are okay, especially this far away from the game?
I don't know. I do sort of empathize with them being asked questions in which there's really no right answer per se, especially when we aren't the best team in the country. If we were winning, these questions would be very easy. They could be like, they could say, look at the pitch and that does the talking, or they can be like, yeah, of course, we're confident we're the best team. So I really don't see any right answer. I think even saying no comment or trying to skirt around the question isn't going to satisfy some people. I think it's probably emblematic of everything at Rangers. There's always a wrong answer, but there might not be a right answer for some questions. I think probably Lundstram's answer is better than what Sakala's was. Although I do think Sakala, up to that game, prior to the semi-final, had 2 or 3 good performances against Celtic. I think in the 1-1 draw in April of last season, and then obviously at the January Old Firm, he sort of perhaps not earned the right because he hasn't been amazing, but he'd been one of the better performances in the last year against Celtic. But Lundstram kind of answered what he could without going too far. But I understand journalists have sort of titles to get and clicks to garner, but I think the question isn't great, and I don't think really anyone really wants to hear it, these sort of answers. I think the only people who do want to hear it is the opposition fans, who will then be like, oh, he's so stupid, we're so much better than them. And it would be a lie to pretend like back in 55 season, if Scott Brown came out and said we're the better team when we were winning by 10 points, I wouldn't enjoy reading that and laugh about it. So it's a difficult sort of sticky position. And they can't say nothing because then everyone's sad about that. But I just think it's a difficult question. And I think hopefully journalists will just ask better questions that aren't filler.
Yeah, I think Curry Munch, I actually probably verge on agreed with Curry Muncher here. When did we start telling players that they're not allowed to say what they think? I'm sick of people telling players not to say anything. They're entitled the same as anyone else. I think from a PR perspective, I think there are some areas where, yes, players should kind of toe the party line. I think if they're giving their opinion on games and they're not being disrespectful, they're just giving a genuine opinion on how they or how the overall team sees a game as they head into it. I don't really have any issue with that one. We always get a bit jittery or a bit on edge when it's in the lead up to an Old Firm game, and everything is obviously amplified when it's going into an Old Firm game as well, with obviously the 24-hour coverage ramps up in intensity. But I don't really have an issue with what Lundstram said at the moment. I think I had probably had slightly more of an issue with what Fashion Sakala said. But again, as was pointed out, he was playing well in the lead up to that game. He'd played well in the previous few Old Firm games. The boys had got a bit of confidence in himself. I don't think we can really blame him for that, and you don't really want to temper that either, to be honest. So I'm not against these kinds of statements. It's just the whole hullabaloo, for want of a better word, that comes with it in terms of all the social media stuff, all the fan reaction, etc., that makes it into more than it actually is. Kieran, while we're talking John Lundstram, one of the points I guess we've discussed as a wider podcast group is what do we do with John Lundstram going forward? He's heading into the final 12 months of his contract. Normally at this stage we would be time to sell him, or do we keep him and let him run down his contract? I guess there's 3 options in total. 1, let him run down his contract and he leaves us for free next summer. 2, offer him a new contract and a contract extension at that. Or 3, try and sell him for $1 million and a half this summer to a team in the Championship and say thanks very much, John, see you later. Where do you stand on that one at the moment?
It's a difficult one, if I'm being really honest, because we know that there's 2 John Lundstrams. There's a one we've seen this season and there's one he's seen to the tail end of last season. For me, I think he's a better player when he plays in a more advanced role in centre mid. But in terms of him staying or sticking around here, it comes back down to the Morelos conundrum. Like, you're going to be one of the highest paid players at the club. You need to be earning that. And at the moment, he's not earning it. But there's a big season ahead next year. The guys need to be on it. When we look at the rumours that float about, if we were to get, say, 2.5 to 3 million for him, I think it could be better invested elsewhere. I'm not so sure how Beale feels about Lundstram. I know he's seen himself on the bench a couple of times. We'll look as well, we spoke about it already, the cup final, he just wasn't at the races whatsoever. Raskin's come in and really turned it on, and we've seen what kind of signing he's becoming. That's what we should be aiming for. So if the money can be invested better elsewhere, then yes, we should be trying to sell him with 1 year left in his deal. But do I think he should be one of the highest paid players at the club? No, at the moment, not at all. Because he's not producing the type of numbers that you need to be producing when you want to be paid that sort of money. So I wouldn't be surprised if we seen him run down his contract the way that he did at Sheffield United. I know this is something that agents encourage players to do now, so that they earn more money, considering that the teams aren't paying a fee, and that tends to get front-loaded onto their wages. So I wouldn't be surprised if we did try and run his contract down, but I also wouldn't be surprised if we did hold on to him, given that we're not exactly flush with money at the moment and we don't want to be going paying a transfer fee if there's nothing coming the other way. So it's one of the ones I'm very much down the middle of. I don't know the definitive answer.
Patrick, I'm going to come to you for your opinion, but before I do, just a couple of comments. Got Aldo McNaught saying he's been here for 2 seasons and been good for 4 months, which is one more than Curry Muncher gives him. He says 2 seasons, had a 3-month purple patch, needs moved on. And then we've got AG saying just by the figure quoted by Kyran there, would take £3 million for Lundstram in a heartbeat. Where do you stand on John Lundstram and what Rangers should do come this summer?
Yeah, I mean, we need to remember, obviously, he was signed in a Bosman deal, much like Lawrence, so he'll be on a fairly hefty wage packet. I'd assume he'd be amongst the top tier of earners at the club. So I think in terms of hypothetical transfer fees and a sort of cut-off of what I'd accept, I would really accept anything on the basis that he had a good 3 or 4 months, depending on which comment you want to agree with. And this isn't an outlier in his career. You saw Sheffield United, he had the one very strong season in the Premier League and was middling average to slightly below average for the rest of his time there. Obviously, it's the Premier League, it's the Championship, it's both leagues are higher quality than what we see, especially the Premier League. It's worlds away from what we have. But I don't think relative to what even the wage he's paying, it's not. I would just get rid of him. He's also not young. I don't think he has any scope to extend his contract as well. And I don't think having him at the club is necessarily the massive positive that it would be relative to what we could spend on his wage. I also think what he's likely being paid, which is probably somewhere in the mid 20,000s, is a wage that we should only be offering 1 or 2 players in the squad. It's not sustainable to have players who are not our very best players there on it. It also would sort of make plans far more clear in the midfield. I think there is a sort of mutual appreciation that we need at least 1 or 2 midfielders. And if we were to get out of Lundstram, that would give us both the wage and the sort of obvious need to bring in at least 2 when we sort of revamp or rebuild, whatever sort of discourse or word you want to use there relative to Beale or other parties. I would hope it's a rebuild to make it more obvious that we need someone there, because as much as he was great and he has iconic moments, I think he's losing that clout he's earned with the fans, and I have to say it's really no one's fault but himself in poor performances, especially at big times. I think that semi-final in February was the sort of straw that broke the camel's back for the vast majority of people. So I would really take any amount of money just to get him off the wage budget, and he's leaving at 29. He'll get a move somewhere. A lot of people sort of talk of this mythic idea of just a stupid championship club will come and take him for like 2 or 3 million. Sadly, the championship is a smart league now, so we'll be looking at 1 or the 2 outliers who still are sort of operating in the dark ages to take us off of him. But I would say thank you for what he's done and send him back down south.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that one. I think if John Lundstram got to the end of the season and we waved goodbye to him, I think that would probably be the best outcome for all, especially for us moving forward and the potential that our midfield has. When you see the likes of Raskin, Cantwell, Tillman, it's got real promise, and I think another addition or 2 in there could really elevate it to a new level. The build up to the Old Firm game is going to continue at pace until the game kicks off on Saturday lunchtime, so there'll be plenty more discussion on that. But I wanted to shift the conversation a little bit to some players we've been linked with as potential new signings over recent days. One that Aldo McNaught has brought up here, he says, "You lads heard anything about Luis Palma? Boys' numbers are decent, could be a replacement for Kent." Patrick, he's a winger, 23 years old from Aris Salonika that reportedly our scouts have watched on numerous occasions. What do you know about him? What can you tell us about him? Is he a promising player that should excite Rangers fans?
Yeah, I mean, when we're looking at the Greek league to the Scottish league, it's really similar in terms of all the key identifier metrics. Well, the play style, similar amount of goals per game. There's a similar relative sort of disparity in the top teams versus the bottom teams. The median quality is relatively similar. So when you're sort of projecting a move, if you're playing for one of the better teams in Greece, which RS is, the sort of the 4th team in Greece, a step below the top 3. So we're saying probably in between what Aberdeen would be, and let's say we had a team who bridged the gap between the Old Firm and Scotland. So they're slightly better than what we have, but definitely not Old Firm quality. So you can sort of project relatively well. He seems to be more so sort of a wide forward as opposed to a sort of traditional winger, like Sakala, but without the rapid pace. He doesn't seem to be like any sort of physical beast, not to say that he's sort of slow. Seems intelligent, strikes the ball well. You'll see in clips some good free kicks. Not the most creative, definitely more of a sort of goal-scoring inclined sort of player. Seems to fit what we need on the basis that we're looking for numbers out wide. I just think he's contracted to 26. This is his first season there. He has little leverage relative to what the club wants, so we'll have to meet their demands. And I think there's a lot of interesting players who would go for a similar price range, who have a better upside, a more immediate ability to contribute, and greater ability to then profit in the long run. But that's not to say he's a bad option. He looks quite good, and it's interesting. And it seems, I saw someone on Twitter post that we've unlocked Greece as a place to scout now after the relative success, or whatever you want to call it, with Čolak.
You must have been following all your Twitter posts, Patrick, over the last year or so, and they figured out that's where we should be heading. Is he with Luis Palma? Would you say is he more of a right-sided winger? Would you say, or is he left-sided and potentially, as Aldo McNaught says, a potential replacement for Kent?
Left-sided and very one-footed. I think his 85% of his touches with his right foot, only 15 with his left. He's not sort of standing foot vibe in the sense that he can't do anything with it, but he's certainly a right-footed player, and he will only play on the left, maybe as a 10. But if you're asking him to play on the right, it's sort of like what we see with Mutondo and Sakala, where you're almost cutting off a bit of their ability by playing them on their sort of against what natural dynamics would suggest. When you have a player playing on the opposite foot of their side, it's always better left-footed right winger, right-footed left winger. So he could play left winger 10, could probably play a striker in a two system, as a sort of more roaming sort of wide forward, as opposed to sort of positionally disciplined centre forward. But I wouldn't buy him as that. But it's interesting to see how he plays for the rest of the season. And it's always good when the numbers look somewhat promising. But that's not to say that there's not better out there.
Thanks very much for that, Patrick. A couple of the guys are rightfully marvelling at your knowledge there on the player. Very impressive indeed. Now, Kyran, time for you to give us your thoughts on the player, Luis Palma.
I don't know if I can follow that up, Patrick. Guys, he's got a good name.
I'll give you a fairly easy one, Kyran. Reports today, a couple on Twitter from Gerard Romero, who I believe has around 1 million followers on Twitter, and Michael Davies as well, saying Rangers are getting closer and closer to signing Billy Gilmore. That's a name that doesn't seem to be going away anywhere soon. I think I'm always sceptical of it because it's a really easy link to make, and it's potentially quite a lazy link to make when Billy Gilmore isn't getting the game time he necessarily expected at Brighton. I think reports were confirmed last week that Brighton are willing to let him go out on loan, heading into next season to ensure he gets game time. Is it just a case of it being a lazy link, or do you feel actually taking Billy Gilmore on loan for a season, bearing in mind it's highly unlikely we'd have an option to buy at the end of it, and therefore likely developing or giving him game time for another club for him to go back to? Where do you stand on Billy Gilmore and what he could potentially bring to Rangers, and the likelihood of this rumour being true, do you think?
I get excited every time we get linked with him. I'm a huge fan. I think he's an excellent player. I'm one of these ones who I always think the if, buts and maybes, had he stayed at Rangers, could he have been our Barry Ferguson for years to come that would have held down that spot? Now, the flip side of it is that I don't think we're a million miles away. I know you said there's no chance we would sign him. Now, do you think for a second that Brighton wouldn't accept around about the £5 million mark and sort of cut their losses, and for us to sign a homegrown player that's going to be our starting centre mid for years to come? I mean, he's only 21. So he's still going to carry a lot of value when you consider his age, and you know what kind of quality player there is there. He's got European experience, he's got Premiership experience, good head on his shoulders. This wouldn't only be a very good signing for us, but it would be a very good long-term signing for us. And I think from the player's side of things, he's got to be looking at this thinking, I'm coming in here, I'm going to play, I'm close to home. Now, he's fell out the national team as well, so he's got to be thinking, I'll play for my national team as well. So it would be a good move for all parties involved. Now, we spoke earlier about Lundstram being on the sort of wage that he is. That's the type of money we should be paying a guy like Billy Gilmore. Now, I don't know how much he's on down there. Considering he's had a couple of moves, then it's going to be considerably more than that. But that's where we look at the Lundstram conundrum and think, right, okay, this could be invested better elsewhere for a guy like Billy Gilmour to come in. Now, if he doesn't come in at the moment, then I think we will see him at some point in a Rangers jersey before the end of his career. It does sound like a lazy link, but there's part of me just thinks that one day we will see Billy Gilmour at Rangers. But I hope it's sooner than later.
Patrick, Robbie RFC 1872 says it makes sense for us to sign Gilmour, lifelong Rangers fan, and would fit our team perfectly. I believe Brighton paid around the £9 million mark for him from Chelsea. He was signed when Graham Potter was still there. Obviously, De Zerbi came in after that and didn't really take a fancy to him. I think he's played a handful of games, even if that, this season, and they've tended to be in the early rounds of the Cup. Ross comes in and says, don't think it's highly unlikely we'd have an option to buy. He struggled for a few seasons now and Brighton may look to move him on. I think we could possibly agree an option to buy around £6 or £7 million. Where do you stand on Billy Gilmour? Is he the right option for Rangers at this stage? Is Rangers the right option for him at this stage? And do you feel that Brighton may look to cut their losses a little bit and accept a couple of £1 million loss on the player?
Yeah, whilst I'd echo what Kyran said and what some of the commenters saying, I'm probably less bullish than most on it. I obviously understand the emotional appeal. And I'm interested in, obviously, Billy Gilmour is, to us, homegrown, as in the fact that he came through our academy, but in the UEFA list he wouldn't be because you have to play at the club or in the nation between the ages of 16 and 21. And he went for 3 years, and he obviously didn't do that. So he would be listed technically as a foreign player on the sort of UEFA registration list, but obviously he would be welcomed as a Rangers product because that's where he got his footballing education up until it was 15 or 16. I think obviously I'm not a fan of the no strings loans where we just sort of rehab a player's value or whatever. I think we're beyond that. I understand its utility when we were getting better and rebuilding our side in 2018 and 19. Where we couldn't do everything in a year and we had so many things to do that we'd have to sort of plug in with limited gaps. I don't like it now, just on the basis that we need to be building sustainably for the future, and every transfer we do will both hopefully benefit us on the pitch and then off the pitch by selling them for more. As much as I think Gilmour's good and he has a lot of skills, I think with the signing of Raskin, there's considerable overlap within their skills. I also think that what would take probably for us what would constitute a fairly large fee to get Gilmour on the option. He's the sort of player coming from a league outside of what is deemed high quality, let's say top 8, where you have the top 5 plus sort of Belgium, Portugal and Turkey, where his role, he's never going to get his 15, 20 million pounds because the only players that do that from our leagues are wingers and forwards who score a ton of goals or just sort of unicorn players like Van Dijk when he was at Celtic or Bassi when he was with us. Those sort of profiles which are just too good not to take a risk on. And what Gilmour does well, he'll do well in Rangers, but it's not something that you can't find 80% of from a youth player. So I don't think we'd stand to profit that much, but that's not to say every transfer is looked through a lens of us making money in the future. I also think what we need specifically in the midfield, obviously technical ability would be great, but I could not imagine us lining up with Raskin, Cantwell and Gilmour in Europe and doing anything but being scudded, because the real thing we saw in Europe was our inability both to compete technically, but the physical and athletic capacity of the other teams versus us was night and day. The greatest leveler in football is having someone who can run a lot and is strong. And a midfield with Gilmour and Cantwell and Raskin, let's say, for example, would be fine in the vast majority of domestic games, but it'd be borderline suicide in Europe. We just get ran along. And I'm not someone who sort of champions physical ability over technical ability in any case, but I do think we need that balance, and we don't have that now. Especially if you want to get rid of Lundstram, for as poor as he's been and sometimes lacks application when he has the right headspace. He is the sort of physical presence which is required in a lot of Rangers fans. Like, I think it's specifically our club more so than almost any other club that I've seen in the world. Just love someone who grafts. So I think there's certainly lots of positives, but I do think that it's not a sort of carte blanche signing that you make if given the offer. I think you have to consider it. But I certainly understand why someone would like the idea of it.
Yeah, Kyran, I think that's an interesting point that Patrick makes around the physicality that we look for in a midfield. I think we are, at times, and strangely for us, given how we've performed in Europe in the last few seasons, but we are so focused on the domestic runs and winning the domestic trophies more consistently, which in my opinion, is right. But we do have the European side of things, and we saw the negative impact that not competing properly in Europe can have, especially with the results that we saw in the Champions League. Do you think, actually, given what Patrick has said there, that it should be the more physical midfielder that we go for in the summer? I can't imagine, given the fact that we've added Raskin, we've added Cantwell, we've added Tillman, we've added Tom Lawrence, who's still got to come back from injury. We've got Ryan Jack, who's probably likely to sign another contract. I can't imagine we're going to add too many midfielders in the summer. So do you think it's, given what Patrick said, maybe the more physical player than the more technical player that we're looking for?
Yeah, it's a very fair point. It did cross my mind when talking about Gilmour that I don't know the best way to put this, but we have, when you look at the signings of Raskin and Cantwell, you look at the squad as well, Yilmaz also, height hasn't really been on our side the past couple of transfer windows, and it is a thing with football that you do need that physical aspect to mix it up in the middle. Now, the Scottish League is one of the most physical leagues in the world, as well as the English League. So, yeah, you do need a level of physicality in there, but yeah, it would. We would have one of the smallest centre mids in the league if it was Billy Gilmour, Raskin, and maybe Cantwell. Maybe I'm doing Cantwell a bit of a disservice there, but in terms of physicality, yeah, we do get that out of Lundstram, but we do need it more as well.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a point I hadn't really considered in terms of the physicality. So definitely one to watch as we move forward. As a final note, I guess, Patrick, one name that was also mentioned alongside Billy Gilmour's was Carvalho from Liverpool. He's 18 years old. I think he's played a decent number of games for the Liverpool first team in central midfield so far this season. The report suggested that Rangers would have a chance to sign him on loan next season. That one definitely seems pie in the sky to me.
Yeah, if it was a loan, it would be without option to buy, because they signed him for free last year or free Bosman pre-contract, and he's been good for Liverpool, and that's amongst the Liverpool team who haven't been great, especially for his age. He's impressed, and at Fulham he was just a boy wonder in the Championship last season. Would he be good to add? It would be like a more secure and confident Amad Diallo in terms of the younger player, slightly physically smaller, which is fine because he'll make up for his technical, but whereas Amad Diallo's sort of CV was in the Italian Primavera, which is the under-18s league, Carvalho's done it in the Championship, which is good for us because it's a better league, and he's played in the Fulham side, which is high possession, he'd match us, but I can't imagine that they wouldn't have a much better loan offer from somewhere where he'd play in the Premier League, in the Bundesliga, or maybe in Serie A or Spain, where he'd be consistently challenged. Whereas it's all great for getting a young player to come to Rangers, learning the expectations of playing for a big club, and perhaps most importantly, if done right, gaining the confidence for a winger like him, maybe 10 goals and 10 assists. We saw it with Celtic with Jota, they managed to sign him, but they managed to rehab his potential considerably by just getting him some confidence. And if that makes the requisite of just coming and playing against players who are far worse than you and just getting the goals, it's good for him. But I can't imagine that the loan pathway manager or the sporting director at Liverpool would choose Rangers over probably a plethora of better options. When I say better, obviously, I don't think they're better clubs than Rangers in the sense, but there would be better opportunities for a player to develop. But that would be a nice one. But as I said earlier, I would prefer we get someone on a permanent. But it's probably never going to happen. But it's interesting, and it's a random one, to be fair.
Yeah, I think we do occasionally get these random ones that are linked to us, sometimes purely because of Michael Beale's contacts in themselves, and people putting 2 and 2 together and getting 14. So it's interesting to see some of these come up, but I think we do have to be realistic about what level of player is going to come to Rangers, and actually the type of player we need as well. So whether Carvalho would be nice to have, obviously he would be, but I think there are, like Kyran mentioned earlier, in terms of a goalkeeper and a striker, there are more pressing areas that we do need to address as we go into the summer and beyond. Okay, well, we'll end it there. We're just about the hour and 10-minute mark. Kyran, thanks very much for joining us.
Always a pleasure, Craig. Thanks for having us, and all the very best, Patrick. Ever insightful and great to listen to, mate. You'll be missed for the next while.
Absolutely, I would echo that, Patrick. Thanks very much for joining us tonight, and thank you again for your contributions over the last year or two. It's been great podding with you.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Thanks for everyone who's listened and sort of bared witness to some of the long ramblings. And yeah, it's been fun. It's what the best part of 20 months, and I assume at some point in the future I'll be back in some juncture.
And we definitely look forward to that point as well. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. Please remember to subscribe to the TII YouTube channel, toggle on those notifications, and you'll get an email every single time we schedule a podcast to go live or we upload a new podcast onto YouTube. In terms of what's coming up the rest of the week, we'll have Kyle live with the warm-up. I think I've remembered that name correctly for the new Wednesday podcast. He'll be live at 7 p.m. on Wednesday. We'll then be live, I believe it's Ross live on Friday night with a preview for the Old Firm game, 8:30 p.m. start for that one, and then we'll be live again over the weekend with our immediate post-match reaction to the Old Firm game, followed on Sunday night by our weekly podcast. So plenty of content coming up over the next 7 days or so. Please make sure to tune in and leave comments, and remember to like the videos as well. It's always appreciated. Thank you very much for listening. Until next time, goodbye.